I think we need to talk about Trump's tariff dividend and how it might single-handedly trigger a financial crisis, worse than anything we've seen in decades and affecting mainly the working-class people of America.
We're going to issue a dividend to our middle-income people and lower-income people of about $2,000, and we're going to use the remaining tariffs to lower our debt. We're going to be lowering our debt, which is a national security thing.
Donald Trump wants to give every low- and middle-income American a $2,000 check, which sounds great, right? But the catch is that you've already paid for it, and if this plan goes through, we might keep paying more for it every time we shop. During his second term, Trump expanded broad import tariffs, which are basically extra taxes on goods made in other countries. The idea was that by making foreign goods more expensive, Americans would buy more domestically made products, more jobs at home, more money staying in the US economy. You get it. Well, that's the theory, but we'll talk about that later. Many government officials and public figures have actually spoken out about the tariffs and how it's a bad idea for the American people. We'll get into that later, too. But Trump was adamant, posting to Truth Socials stating that people that are against the tariffs are fools and argued the U.S. is now the richest, most respected country in the world, with minimal inflation due to the success of his tariffs.
Without tariffs, this country would be in such trouble. The numbers were reported so incorrectly. The real numbers are trillions of dollars have been taken in or gotten in terms of investment from the tariffs.
But honestly, this plan to collect money from the tariffs seems to have actually worked, with the U.S. Treasury Department stating that over $195 billion has been collected by the government so far. Because of this, whilst the specific details about how the rebates are to be delivered isn't written in stone, Trump has said he plans to redistribute the money back to the American people of low to middle income households as a dividend or a rebate. And though I'm sure everyone would be happy with an extra $2,000 in their pockets, many questions are being raised, especially about its feasibility and economic impact.
Everyone hates me for this. I would not be handing out more stimmy checks.
Skip the checks. Just get rid of the tariffs and watch prices fall.
The major issue with these dividend payments is that, well, they don't seem possible, like at all. For Trump to keep his promise means that if all 150 million Americans that earn below the high-paying income cutoff point were to receive a check of $2,000 from the tariff collection, the government would be paying U.S. citizens around $300 billion, which isn't even enough when looking at how much the tariffs have collected in total. And not only that, but according to economists at the Tax Foundation, the real amount collected from the tariffs is around $90 billion when you subtract all the other expenses that come with collecting the tariffs, which is nowhere near enough to deliver these dividend payments.
And plenty of economists have pointed out, that if you're talking about Americans making less than $100,000, if you're sending $2,000 to each of those adults, that's hundreds of billions of dollars in rebate checks. Tariff revenue has not hit that, $800 billion, or roughly what that figure is that would cost yet.
So how do you pay for a $300 billion promise with only $90 billion in the bank? You don't, not unless you borrow money or cut spending elsewhere, and that means adding to the national debt, not reducing it. That directly contradicts what Trump's Treasury Secretary said just months ago, that tariff revenue would help chip away at our $1.8 trillion annual deficit. Every dollar spent on the tariff dividend is a dollar not used in reducing the debt, and honestly could potentially be a dollar that increases the debt if the revenue from the tariffs doesn't meet the $300 billion requirement. Another part of this whole mess is that an introduction of these dividend payments seems very similar to the stimulus check which were distributed in 2021 to 2022, which helped fuel the worst inflation spike America had seen in 40 years. But here's what governments always seem to miss. You can't just put a random lump sum into the average American's pockets without things going wrong. See, it boosts demand overnight, but supply doesn't magically grow to match, and that's what pushes prices, and prices rise way faster than paychecks. In 2022, the peak inflation rate was 9.1%, whilst wages were only increasing at around 5%. This basically means that when these dividend checks are distributed, your wage goes down, being worth around 3% to 4% less every year. I know, it's backwards, but trust me, it gets worse. Remember when I said a lot of public figures called tariffs a bad idea? Yeah, they were kind of right. See, tariffs are just import taxes, but it's not foreign companies footing the bill, it's us. Those added costs get passed on to you, through higher prices on everything from electronics to groceries. So if you combine tariffs pushing prices up and checks pumping even more money into the economy, you've got a recipe for a second inflation spike. Some economists are already raising red flags, even if the White House calls it speculation. And here's the cherry on top. The Supreme Court might shut the whole thing down. See, Trump imposed these tariffs using a 1977 law meant for economic emergencies, giving the president temporary powers to act fast. But now, justices are questioning whether he overstepped, using emergency powers to set up what looks more like a tax system, which legally only Congress can do.
The future of his tariffs hangs in the balance. Justices heard oral arguments on the case today. At issue is a legal question around the limits of executive power. The court is deciding whether the president has the authority to impose sweeping tariffs on imports under a law that's meant to apply to national emergencies.
Remember when I said the goal was to encourage buying American? Well, the court suspects these tariffs were really designed to quietly collect cash from consumers, money that would then be used to pay down debt or fund giveaways like this dividend plan. Why is that a problem? Well, because the president legally doesn't have the power to do that.
A lot of what this case was about is whether or not there was actually an emergency, and who gets to decide? Is it the president? Is there oversight to that? Can the courts come in and question it? Can the legislature come in and question it?
If the court rules against Trump, it could force the government to refund billions in tariff money to importers. Trump claims the number could be over $3 trillion, probably exaggerated. But even a realistic refund of $100 to $200 billion would erase the very funds he planned to give back to Americans. And don't forget, if refunds include interest, that's an even bigger blow, almost like the government has to pay a reverse tax for collecting money it wasn't allowed to take. But the thing they don't talk about is that whilst these tariffs are technically being paid by the importers, the real people hit aren't the billionaires or the large corporations. It's the low-middle income Americans. See, the tariffs are basically a tax on imports, but whilst the governments are the ones that collect the money, prices are increased due to these tariffs and the real cost is passed to us. And for those in the working class, as that is who spend the majority of their income on the basic necessities for survival, such as clothing, food, electronics, etc., which are the items typically brought from overseas. A recent analysis showed that in 2025, the average family lost about $2,400 a year in extra costs caused by tariffs. For low-income families, that figure is lower in dollars, maybe $1,300, but it's a much higher share of their total income. And do you want to know what's even crazier? The $2,000 dividend Trump's promising? It might just be a refund of what you already paid through higher prices. And still with all that, wages aren't keeping up. Inflation in 2025 is hovering around 3%, but wage growth has slowed to that same level or less, which means your paycheck is buying less, not more. One Bank of America report says 24% of households are now living paycheck to paycheck, with inflation and stagnant wages as the biggest reason why. So sure, a one-time check might feel good, but it doesn't fix the bigger problem. Life just keeps getting more expensive.
People at the top who have money in the market, they own their homes, they're doing okay. They could absorb these price increases, but a lot of people who are living paycheck to paycheck, not so much, right? They're really the ones who are hurt here.
So what do I really think about this whole tariff dividend thing? Honestly, I don't think those $2,000 checks are coming. In fact, I don't think they were ever meant to. I think Trump saw the Supreme Court challenge coming, and this whole tariff rebate was a last-ditch attempt, a way to rally the public behind him, make it look like he's fighting for the people, while putting pressure on the court to back off. But let's be real, does it even matter? Because whether the court strikes down the tariffs and forces a refund, or Trump wins and somehow hands out $2,000 checks to millions, the damage is already done. The debt isn't shrinking, the economy isn't stabilizing, and as always, it's the working class Americans who end up footing the bill. Same story, different day. This is the Four-Eyed Economist. Thanks for watching.